Hello YouTube and hello conference report. I wanted to respond to both your trolling video and the video response that you made to me because my brain started kind of dancing on both of these points, and I wanted to put them into one video, but I think it's better to split them into two just for length's sake. And I think that uh, the the thoughts on trolling that you've inspired by invoking Duchamp um, makes a good argument unto itself also. So I don't want to sully that by putting so. Apologies for giving you two videos instead of one. So this notion of trolling, right? I want to my brain really started moving here, and thinking about trolling and thinking about the sort of broad context of trolling uh, in relation to Duchamp. And what I want to say, what I want to say is that in any given conversation, right, and in any given discourse, there's a set of sort of transcendental rules that structure the internality of the conversation. Um, so I'm thinking here of both again Foucault and Habermas, who both kind of tried to get at this. This is what their philosophy is really about. And Wittgenstein um, bumps up against this line, but he doesn't flesh it out in quite the same way. So for Habermas, because I think it's the easiest to understand, and his system doesn't really work, but there's something true about it at the same time. For Habermas, in order to have a conversation, we need to take certain assumptions to be the case before we can even begin talking, right? So some of those assumptions are like, I'm assuming that you're being honest when you say what you're going to say. I'm assuming that you're not obfuscating when you say what you're going to say, right? I'm assuming that we're on equal levels of power. You know, there's something democratic about sort of ideal discourse, if you like, right? So in order to make a statement, I've already assumed a certain amount of things before I can make a statement. This is what I mean when I say it's transcendental, right? It's a condition of possibility for having a conversation at all, right? Um, and there's a series of rules that kind of govern what a conversation is, right? So I think that you find this illustrated in a really interesting way um, surrounding racism, right? So I've met people who are really really racist, and but you don't know that they're really racist until you get into a room and you're talking with them kind of one on one, right? And and then they'll say something that makes you realize in this moment of revelation, like, wow, this person is a bigot. Um, but the reason why they can't say such things in public, um, it's obvious. It's because in our discourse there are certain meta rules, right, that form our discourse that exclude this kind of talk, right? And so in order to participate in the social reality that we engage in, we have to they have to conform to those notions, right? So there's this whole like system of rules uh, underneath conversation. Where I disagree with Habermas, incidentally, is I don't think that these are universal. I think that they're historical and cultural. I think they change, they shift. He wants to make them universal. So this this system of rules, what trolling really is the attempt to introduce a cut. It's a very violent action in a certain way. It's an attempt to introduce a cut at that level of discourse, right? It's not I'm going to reject argument It's that I'm not even accepting the rules that allow for your argument to appear in the first place, right? It sits within a game and that I'm going to refuse to play, and therefore I'm going to try and disrupt. Right, that's what disruption really is. So there's this violent uh, antisocial gesture in there, and I'm trying to use those words neutrally, right? I'm trying, I don't mean to attach a value judgment to say it's a bad thing or a good thing, but that's what it is. It's antisocial and it's violent in a very neutral sense. Um, and you mentioned Duchamp, and this is what got me thinking, because it also got me thinking about one of Duchamp's great admirers, John Cage. I'm a musician. I studied music, and John Cage is somebody who I've thought about a lot. And his piece 433 is kind of the musical equivalent of the fountain, right? The idea is, well, you can just go look it up. It's interesting, and there's a lot of writing on it, and John Cage wrote about it a lot, and etc. But it's this idea of artistic trolling to introduce a cut into the predominant musical discourse that existed up to then, and it still has effects. John Cage's big inspiration alongside Duchamp was Zen Buddhism, right? He's a Zen Buddhist, and what I want to say here is that this opened up a lot for me. The revelation of, like, if you go back and read the stories surrounding Zen masters, right? The whole idea is to troll somebody, right? The whole idea is to disrupt the foundation upon which their notions or their concepts even exist, right, or can even appear. So the one famous one is the guy. A guy goes to a Zen Buddhist master and he says, how long is it going to take me to attain enlightenment? And the Zen master says, 10 years. And the guy says, well, what if I work really, really hard and I train every day and meditate for forever a day, and so what if I really commit myself? And the Zen Buddhist says, oh, well then 20 years, right? So what's being the Zen master is clearly, in this sense, trolling the novice. But the point is that he's trying to expose a weakness in the assumptions through which the novice is thinking about enlightenment or whatever it is, right? So what I want to say is that there's something inherently mystical about the gesture of trolling, or rather, there's something inherently trollish about the history of mysticism. I'm not sure which version of that is more true. But the other example that I would point to is Jesus, actually, and Zizek, who's kind of an intellectual love of mine. Zizek makes this really strange point about Jesus, where he says, one of the things that I really love about the texture of the text of the New Testament is that Jesus, they come to some, he's talking, he's preaching, they come to some difficult theological point, and everybody says, we don't get it, and he says, okay, I'll tell you a parable then. I'll make it simple, I'll tell you a story. So then Jesus will tell a parable, and the fascinating thing about the parable that he then tells is that it makes it more confusing, right? It's precisely not a simplifying gesture. So Jesus throughout the Gospels is playing this perverse kind of trollish game with people, which is fascinating, and I think I think again this shows a kind of relationship between the esoteric mystical side of religion and the and trollish behavior, right? And we can take this one step further too, and we can say that if what's being done is that there's a sort of violent cut into the assumption upon which social reality is formed, right? If we can say that this is, it's radical, and I use this sense in the true authentic sense of the word. Radical means to the root of something, right? So the gesture of trolling is to cut to the root of communication and discourse and disrupt that. I want to say that there's something. First of all, you mentioned in the trolling video, and I agree that there's something about exposing authoritarian relationships within a space that's assumed to be free. But I would go one step further, or I would supplement that and say that there's also an element of taking that which appears to be necessary and making it contingent, or making it appear to be contingent, which is a genuinely radical gesture. And I think that this is what's radical about humor and jokes. So the notion of I've given this example before. It's one thing if I want to criticize the American Constitution. It's one thing to say the Constitution is, well, it's clearly racist. It's it was formed so that the aristocracy could always sort of dominate the lower class, which is actually a fact. But all that talk can just be dismissed, right? On the other hand, I think it's a much stronger gesture to say something like, "Oh no, the Constitution was a great historical document," right? So you're praising it, but you're praising it in its contingency, so it dislodges it from its ideological position within our political discourse. So this revealing of contingency is a part of it. But also then, within the role of mysticism, right? The reason why this cut has to take place is that the divine, or in the Buddhist case, nirvana, and in the Christian case, God, right? These are they're ineffable categories. They can't be understood through conceptual thinking. So this cut serves the function of sort of suspending the conceptual mind, so that to allow for some experience, right? Some divine experience, if you like. But I want to say that this is also political, right? It's not just religious, particularly in talking about radical politics or utopian politics, right? So if we're talking about establishing a radical qualitative break into some other system, right? Some kind of revolutionary gesture. What Badiou calls the event, something unprecedented appearing, right? This we can't. This is something that's also ineffable to us, right? Because we are sort of ideologically constituted within the discourse, the socio-political, economic realities that surround us and give rise to us. We're so ensconced in that to try and conceive of a future that is beyond is something that's potentially impossible. So all that can be done here is something like the mystical gesture. It's to introduce a cut into the assumptions of discourse that make it possible. So what I want to say is that for religious experience and for utopian political experience, and I think that these are deeply interlinked, and potentially artistic as well. It, in order for that to happen, in order for a revolutionary moment to occur, there has to be something like a gesture of trolling, right? There has to be something. There has to be a violent cut into that transcendental meta discourse in order for anything to get off the ground at all. And so what I want to say there, and this is a criticism, I guess, of not of you, but of certain kinds of internet practice, that without without allowing for that, right? Without allowing for taking let's say a zero tolerance policy to trollish behavior, or what is perceived to be trollish behavior, is inherently an attempt, or maybe not intentionally, but it carries with it the effect of stamping out anything like, what Hegel would call a determinate negation, right? It's an attempt to it stops, it fixes, it freezes things, it stamps out the revolutionary. So in some sense, I don't want to romanticize trolling. I don't think that trolling is innately a good thing. I don't want to say trolling is always good. But I want to say that I want to say that all radical gestures and moments have to first take the form of what we would nowadays call trolling, right? So this is my what I think I've come to in my theory of this is my new theory of trolling that I've developed, and that's a very long video, but I think but I'd love your thoughts on it, and I'm gonna post a second one soon on the video that you made in response to me. Have a good day.